Thank you, Leah. Okay, so once again, let's kind of talk through this really quickly. Does the size of a radian depend on the size of the circle that you have? No, the radian measure is always going to be the same regardless of the size of that circle, right? Approximately how many radians in a semicircle? Pi radians covers a semicircle, which is 180 degrees, right? And how many radians in an entire circle? That covers 360 degrees. That's 2 pi radians, right? Okay, so we need to talk about, now that we have that information, we need to talk about how we go about what the process is for converting. If we have degrees and we need to convert to radians, and vice versa, if we have radians and we need to convert to degrees, okay? There are radian measures that I will ask that you get memorized, and it's kind of some good mental math that we're going to do with respect to that. So we will get to that on down the road, but for now, we are going to use our graphing our calculators to do this. And you don't necessarily need a graphing calculator. You can do that on any basic calculator, but the graphing calculator kind of helps because it gives us that fraction. Thanks, Lucy. All right, so angles can be measured in degrees or radians. We learned 1 full revolution is 2 pi radians. So in other words, 2 pi radians is equal to how many degrees? Yeah, 360 degrees. And pi radians is equal to how many degrees? 180. And that's the important, that pi radians is equal to 180 degrees. That's basically what we use as our conversion factor to do these conversions, okay? So I want you to see what it says that we're going to do, but then I'm going to kind of talk you through almost, it's the same process, but a little bit different thought process with how we are solving these, okay? So if you think about it, it should make sense to you that if we have degrees, then we're going to have to get a pi included in there, right? So think about this conversion here. We're going to multiply by pi over 180. We need a pi in the answer, and it's going to need to be in the numerator. So you can think of it as multiplying by pi over 180. But the other way to think about this is that you're just going to take whatever the degree measure is, and you're going to divide it by 180, and you're going to simplify that fraction. And then you just have to remember to include the pi in your final answer. So if you plug 50 divided by 180 in your calculator, what do we get? What's the reduced fraction? 5/18. So in other words, 5 pi over 18 radians is equal to that 50 degrees, right? If we take 72 degrees, we're going to do 72 divided by 180. What do we get as our fraction? I'm sorry? 2/5. Good. So it's 2/5. We've got to remember to include the pi also. So 2/5 pi, or 2 pi over 5. You can say it either way. The pi is considered part of that numerator. Okay? All right. So that's if we're going from degrees to radians. If we're going from radians, if you see these fractions with the pi's in it, then that's a radian measure. How do we go to degrees? Well, we're just multiplying by 180 over pi. Just watch for a second. I want you to think about this. If we have 5 pi over 6 and we're multiplying by 180 over pi, what happens with the pi's? Yeah, they just divide out, so they're gone, right? Which should make sense. We don't want a pi if we're talking about degrees. So kind of an easier way of thinking about this is to just realize, for me, I like to think about this almost as a substitution. I'm going to end up multiplying 5 times, well, I know pi is equivalent to 180 degrees. So I'm just plugging in, I'm substituting in place of the pi, what I know pi is equal to, which is 180. So I'm doing 5 times 180 with the substitution divided by 6, okay? If you have calculator, it's very straightforward and easy. If you don't have calculator, do the division first. What's 180 divided by 6? How many times does 6 go into 180? 30. And then what's 30 times 5? 150. So you can do, for many of these, you're going to be able to kind of do some mental math for that also. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to do 3 times 180, which is what I know pi is equivalent to, divided by 5. And when you plug that into your calculator, what do you get? How many degrees? 108 degrees. Beautiful. All right, try those at the bottom. We'll go over those in just a sec. Okay? 810 degrees. Sounds good. Okay. I want you to add a little bit down at the bottom of that page. I'm sorry. Any questions on any of those, though, before we move on? Okay. I want you to add a little bit down there at the bottom of that page. For the majority of what we will see, you will see a pi in a radian measure. So that's how you know it's a radian measure. But not all radian measures are written with a pi in it. Sometimes it will just be a number. So it will be something like it'll say something like 1.5 radians. Or it'll say 0.25 radians. Right? And so if we need to convert that to degrees, I want you to be able to think about that process as well. We're going to do the same thing. We just have to deal with a little bit more with the calculator here. If we're doing 1.5 radians and we want to convert to degrees, we're going to think about what our conversion factor is. So we're going to multiply. So in other words, we would do 1.5 times 180, and then all divided by pi. Well, we're truly going to use the pi key on our calculator. And the pi key on your calculator, I think, is bottom left. Is that right? Oops. I want you to take that in your booklet.
Oh.
I just saw you have that in there. Okay, so if we do 1.5 times 180 divided by, yeah. Do you see the pi key? Who needs help finding the pi key? What do we get for that? 1.5 radians is equal to 85.94 degrees. Did everybody get that? Oops, I just realized I forgot to mention to you guys. It's going to be really important now that you are keeping track of what mode your calculator is in, whether you are in degrees or radians, right? If you're already in radians and you punch in 1.5, you're going to get something very different than if you're in degrees and you punch in 1.5, right? Okay, so if we have 0.25 radians, think about what that means we're going to do. We're going to do 0.25 times 180, all divided by pi. And what is that equal to? So there's one other thing we're going to write in that space down there. What do we get for that one?
14.32.
14.32 degrees. Okay. I want you to have an idea, what is 1 radian equal to in terms of a degree measure? So it's helpful to have an idea. Besides that visual that you have, 1 radian is equal to how much? So think about what we would do. We would do 1 times 180, or in other words, just 180 divided by pi. And that should give us 57.295, da, 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 da. Usually we round that to 57.3 degrees. Okay, so I think it's just helpful to kind of think about or know or realize, okay, this 1 radian is equal to about this amount, but you've got that visual there also, right, with that pie slice that you've pulled out. Okay, we are skipping that page for now. Take a minute, work with your neighbor if you need to. I want you to just practice with these as well. We'll go over these answers in just a couple of in a few minutes also, okay?